very often you will see a manel, which means that you will see many suited men on the panel and not enough women. So I'm glad that we have pretty much equal representation here today. So that's a great feeling. But let's get started. And Anu, I want to start by talking to you, because we were just reminiscing the last time that we were together in Hyderabad shooting for a program that I do, which by the way also turns 21 in June, Young Turks, the world's longest running show on startups and entrepreneurship. Anu was on that program 17 years ago, so congratulations, and what a journey you've made.
Thank you.
And here's what I want to understand from you. Through your own experience, through your own journey, what will it take to get more women, not just to get into STEM, but to take STEM forward as a career?
So I think today we are seeing a lot of young women who take STEM as a career. I think we are seeing a lot more drop-off that is there at the senior leadership levels. And I think there are several reasons for that. But at the same time, I think we can increase the number of people who are going in. So compared to when I was going to IIT, for instance, to now, I think we've definitely seen an increase in the pipeline of women who are coming into the colleges in the first place. But I think the thing has to start even before that, right? How do we get young children to be excited about these areas? And I remember my dad was a scientist, and I think for us, 3 of us girls and a brother, all of us got very excited about STEM, right? So I think it has to start from the time when you are a child. But at the same time, I think when you're looking at senior leadership positions, I think multiple things matter, right? One is, are we recognizing them? Is there a bias, inherent bias that comes in when people are recruiting? And I think now with AI, maybe people can use...
I was expecting that. I was expecting that. Like everything else, AI is going to be the answer to this problem as well, the bias problem.
Correct. No, it can be an answer. It can be a problem as well. But I think that one of them is the bias, right? So when we look at, Mapmygenome is very purely a STEM company, and we have pretty much equal representation, and actually initially had a lot more women than men. And I think part of that problem is that always likes to get more people of their kind. So I think if you want to remove the bias, we have to look at it as saying that, can we stop looking at people we like to bring on board who are like us, but to bring in people who are not like us? Yeah. And I think if you want to remove that bias, that has to be done in a way where people don't think about that as a problem. And I think that is a starting point for a lot of problems that start off, right? Whether it's recruitment, whether it's leadership or others. The second is also, can we change the conditioning in terms of, when women don't speak up in meetings, can we force, sort of encourage them to speak up, not force, but sort of, get them to speak up. And things and I think the other bigger problem is that we don't have yet enough number of people who have already gone out through that funnel. And I think we need to have enough role models for people to be able to sort of be encouraged and inspired to be able to get there. So there are many more solutions, but I think, I'll let others talk about it.
I think you've gotten us off to a great start. And I think, the idea about creating more role models, that's what Future Female Forward is about. We want to create a diverse set of role models so that people can see their own journeys in those stories that we are telling. But you brought up the issue of attrition, and let me get each one of you to comment on that. And let's start with what you're doing at Cognizant in order for you to be able to retain talent. Because, this leaky pipeline is not new to any particular sector, and it's not a specific problem to India. This is a global challenge. How are you trying to address that within Cognizant?
Thank you, Shereen. Thank you for having me here. But I think as Anu was mentioning, this cannot be a sort of a lip service which companies do, sort of addressing this DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is, of course, in some sense, the mix itself, but then equity and inclusion actually make it really work in some sense. So when you look at a company like Cognizant, it starts from the top. I mean, I think the tone we set at the top is so critical for us to make sure that we are able to sort of take it all the way down to where we are actually able to make that, maintain that mix in across the teams and so on and so forth. Several initiatives. I mean, as I said, it has to start at the top. For example, our board has about 38% diversity. So we start from there and then go all the way down in terms of ensuring that we do at least try and get the, as you know, in the leadership, it's always an issue. And you mentioned it in the beginning when in your intro, saying that we don't have a problem of supply in the beginning. I mean, when you look at a university, etc., we do have a 52% enrollment of tech talent in the universities. We do a very good job of hiring those. So our initial intake from universities, roughly about 54-55%. That's really, I mean, it's actually above parity in some sense. But then the moment they come in, as you rightly said, over the period, you tend to have this dropout and then so the leaky pipeline, if you may. And then before we get to leadership level, it's very, it's not a good number for the industry and for everybody.
Anything specific that you've done to change that?
Yes, so 2-3 things. One is we do run like most companies, we do programs like Propel, for example. It's a great program where we do in 2 steps. One is in terms of the middle managers. When women reach a certain level, we make sure that we train them very specifically to make sure that they're able to take up the leadership roles, and that has to be done in volume, right? I mean, doing it for a small cohort is not going to be sufficient, so we do it in much larger number. That's one. Number 2 would be a program called Returnship, which is when people want to take a break, go do whatever they need to. When they want to come back, how do you really enable them? I think it's a lot of work in terms of making sure that even though they've taken a break of maybe 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, ability for them to come back into a workforce. And are we really facilitating some of that? So lots of programs around ensuring that, especially after, let's say, for example, maternity is the reason why they're taking a break. Can we support that, during the period as well as post maternity when they come in? How do you really make sure that they're included in some sense? Right. So I can talk about many of those programs that we do in terms of doing that.
Those are 2 good examples that you've shared with us. Rahul, speaking about, the tone from the top at HCLTech, the chairperson is a woman. But let's address this issue that I raised, which is also about the fact that in a more and more digital environment that we're in a world where we are going to be driven by technology, do you fear that the gender gap is only going to widen if we don't encourage more women to take up STEM, to adopt technology, to be part of the digitization process?
So, first of all, is my voice being heard?
Yeah, it's fine.
So first of all, it's very important to note that, when women come into the workforce, you need to make sure that they stay for a longer period of time. And one of the things that we do additionally is that, we've identified women leaders who become like go-to people, right? Who become role models. You may call them role models. And we encourage other people to emulate them in terms of, growth, career paths, etc. And we also have programs which are there for women, which enable them to see the path forward. We've got programs like Stepping Stone, Ascend, etc., which encourage people to stay longer term with the company. I think another important thing we do is that we've identified what you may call as the marquee jobs in the company, right? Okay. So for example, a sales job is a marquee job, because it's seen as a, kind of taking the company forward. Some of the jobs which are for, principal architects, etc. Again, jobs which enable the company to take it forward. We encourage women to go into these jobs, right? So therefore, what happens is, therefore, women see themselves not only as contributing to the masses of the people in the company, but also see themselves as, and have career paths towards marquee jobs within the company. So that's one thing we do to make sure that women stay with us for longer. Now, coming to your question on digital divide, right? So digital divide, it's something outside our company, because obviously we are a technology company, and a lot of our women employees are already digitally savvy. But digital divide is something which we have to address as a, as a society, as a company, as a culture outside our company as well. So we have, a couple of tiers of things that we do. Obviously, we work with our clients in certain accessibility-based products offerings that they have. We develop those technologies for them, which then in turn enable more people to access digital technologies. Also, what we do is that we have a certain amount of effort that we put in to make sure that people who come into the company. So, for example, we have programs in place today, where we take people who are not, let's say, from the English-speaking background, right? Who are educated in vernacular language. So how do we make sure that those people then get opportunities to work within the company in typically what is an English-speaking kind of an industry? Right? So these bridge programs, these bridge platforms, etc., in place enable us to then break the digital divide, right? So people who do not have access, and this is not only for women, but in general, digital divide which is there. for people who do not have access to the same kind of
Absolutely.
information.
But
So
it's
that
more
also,
pronounced for women.
Exactly. It's more pronounced for women because they are also some of the weaker sections in terms of the ability to get this education. So many programs which do that, which enable the women to also come into the digital divide and come in more digitally savvy areas.
Yeah, and I think we will have to collectively address this issue. As you said, it's not about one company or one organization. It will have to be addressed at a much larger level, at a national level, at a state level as well. We've got two Deeptis on the panel. So let me come to Deepti at WeHub first. Because, as we've been pointing out, that WeHub is India's first state-led women incubator. Now, Deepti, take me through the journey so far. When we talk about women, we end up talking about women's empowerment. We very rarely talk about women's entrepreneurship. And I want to change the conversation to that. What has the experience been at WeHub?
It's a very interesting question, and it's the first time I've actually been asked that, because many times when I tell somebody that I work at, I had WeHub, the first thing is, oh, you're empowering women. But one of the things that through WeHub we've been trying to do over the past 5 years is to consistently go and take the conversation from empowerment to enterprise creation. Because the more women, when we talk about role models, right, each of the speakers before me have spoken about role model creation. So to have more women entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs in general, we need to have more entrepreneurs who are actually creating jobs, who are creating enterprises. And that's been the journey of WeHub. We have created more than 2,328 women entrepreneurs, and each of them has created an average of 2 jobs at least. And we are also making sure that, while this entire conversation is to have more and more women entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, the focus for us is not to say that we'll lower the bar and say that everybody walk in. So one of the things we've been working on with a lot of focus is that to have more women entrepreneurs, it's not good to lower the bar. We keep the bar high and create more opportunities for more and more women who are homepreneurs, flexipreneurs, hobbypreneurs, any kind of entrepreneurs that they are currently, to become business owners.
What is the biggest barrier to women enterprise and women entrepreneurship? How much of it is things like access to finance, access to credit? How much of it is cultural? How much of it is patriarchal? What is the biggest barrier?
Simply put, the biggest barrier is access to WeHub, I guess. I think.
Nicely played. Nicely played. The IPL is over, but that was a sixer.
No, to be honest, I think the biggest barrier always is knowing where to go. Because a lot of times, when you ask all these questions, there needs to be one mentor or one-stop shop where they can come in and say that this is what I want to do to get my business going. And once you find that anchor, there is no stopping any entrepreneur who's raring to go.
Naveen, what's the experience been at Novartis specifically? Telangana is also a state which is promoting itself as a hub for life sciences, healthcare, pharma, etc. This is also a space where actually we have seen not just the leadership role, but again, in general, a lot of women move towards this. What's the experience been like at Novartis? And if I were to ask you to add to the playbook that we just released earlier this evening, what are the ideas that you would put on the table?
Yeah, thanks, Shereen. So Novartis has been in India since 1947. Probably one of the few large innovative pharma companies that has a whole range of operations in India, from research, development, technology, operations, etc. And I'm really fortunate to be part of this global company that is super committed to actually equity and inclusivity, right? And data doesn't lie, right? So 51% of associates in Novartis are female, 48% are leaders, 38% at the board level, right? And this is because we've been really inventive, innovative, and tried to challenge our own barriers to actually achieve this, right? There are many things that we've done. Generally speaking, 4 top things. One is to remove bias, right? So we use software, AI to screen our advertisements to remove gender bias, because bias is hidden. You don't know it's there. So when we post a job, it is neutralized, any kind of bias that we have. We are one of the first company to give equal paternal leave, right? So parental leave, equal parental leave out there. And then you think about what that removes, the social bias that we have, that mothers get the leave, fathers shouldn't be involved. You can see how such a policy change by a company might go a little way in removing that kind of
I think it will go a long way, so kudos to you and a big round of applause as well to that. And I think, in fact, that's one of the ideas that comes up in the playbook, because this is something that many companies, and I know Sangeeta Reddy is here with us. Sangeeta, thanks for joining us. Sangeeta raised this as well in our Mumbai chapter. I distinctly remember this as an idea that we need to try and move towards parental leave. Let the choices be with the family unit as opposed to companies dictating who can or cannot avail of the leave and so on and so forth. And let the narrative change that the primary caregiver always has to be the woman. Of course, at a certain point in time, that is the case biologically. But provide the flexibility for family units to take those decisions. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, worldwide, the take-up is fantastic, and the response from our associates is, wow, it's amazing that we are working for a company that can think on those lines. Pay transparency and equity. And this is, again, I always believed that, everyone earns their worth and over time you improve, but actually I had to change my own beliefs because there is really a bias and inequity in pay that creeps in without your knowledge when we looked at data. We've done this worldwide, we looked at it in India, we looked at it in all the countries. There is pay inequity. So over 3 years, we've really addressed the issue and brought it to a completely same level across the world for any gender, let it put it that way, right? So,
Deepti, let's pick up on that last point about pay inequity. And as Naveen said, that culturally it is an organization that nurtures meritocracy, that nurtures a gender-neutral environment, yet they've seen inequities creeping in. What is the data telling you? And I know Deloitte has been doing a lot of work on this front. While progress has been made in some aspects, we have a long distance to go. What does the data highlight at this point in time?
Right. So, Shereen, what data says, if I just see in terms of the gender pay equity and the various researches that are done there, right, we definitely see, it is said that, there is a gap, right? Women typically tend lesser. But if you look at the root causes of it, right, it will take some time because this is driven in the history, right? It has taken, women started late, right? Today, most of the women, right, like we said, 38% in board representation, 62% is still men. So when you look at a gender pay equity, because our average, right, the overall size is lower, even if you apply the same principles of merit and everything else, when you look at it at a macro, at an average level, it does come down, right? And we at Deloitte, we encourage people to say, a number, right, does not represent anything. You need to look at what are the principles behind it. But there are organizations who are doing significantly a lot more to bridge that gap. So there is a lot of, as you said, everybody said that there is AI and technology being used to reduce that bias, to ensure that there are specific programs that women perform well, right, and move forward. So that is something that we are seeing significantly. The other thing that we are seeing now is that organizations are significantly doing is, if I just apply human-centered design and, Maslow's hierarchy, the first three are pretty much table stakes, right? That's what every organization has to do. We call it diversity 1.0.
Yeah.
Now it is, inclusion 2.0, which how do you encourage women and how do you play on their self-esteem and self-actualization? So instill ambition when they're very young. So which is, like we go to interiors of tier 2, tier 3 and tier 4 cities, right? Look at engineering colleges and pick bright students from there. Get those women there. Train them so that they don't make career as a secondary choice, but that's a lifestyle choice that becomes, right? When they're in the middle career, demonstrate care. So we have a flex program with 9 dimensions of flex, right? It could be on skill, it could be on time, location, how you work through. So we adjust our pace towards them than asking them to adjust pace to us. So that is something which is significant, right? And the third biggest thing that we've started playing with data is now there's diversity within diversity. All of our organizations today will have women, which is Gen Z, as well as women, who've been there for 1960s and 70s and so on. Yeah. Their value system, their ethics, their motivational drivers are very, very different. You would focus on maternity, but maybe for, leaders, you need to focus on, it's a very uncomfortable conversation on, what happens to them during menopause and others. Most of the organizations are at a very infant stage of such policies and looking at that when you drive that. So I think it's a whole spectrum of these things that we need to look at, and that would gradually bridge the gender pay equity, which today I would say is a number because of a lot of historic reasons that are driven behind it.
You mentioned menopause. menopause. I don't think that that's just an uncomfortable conversation. I don't think that that's a conversation that happens at all. That's not a conversation. We've just about started having a conversation about menstruation. I don't think we've got to menopause yet. But Subhrakant, let me come to you because, we had put together at the Delhi chapter the FICCI CNBC TV18 first survey, which had done a survey of the FICCI membership to understand what motivates women to stay on, what companies are doing to be able to retain women, how do you bring down attrition. Through the course of this journey, what have been the key insights that you're taking away now as you have these conversations?
Well, first and foremost, I think it is important to have these conversations. And, we talked about role models, but also putting out these stories out there and seeing what companies are doing. And, there's a lot of wonderful work being done, but more companies need to emulate that. If I were to, for example, take a look at hardcore manufacturing, right? I think there were some inherent issues which held back women from participating. Those laws have been changed in terms of, women not being able to work the night shift or whatever it is. It's been quite a while since those laws have been changed, but the hangover effect sort of continues. And therefore, there needs to be, I think, very focused attention on in those sectors, in those areas where women's participation has not been up to the mark, to bring that up. And for example, if I were to talk about Odisha, there's been some wonderful work being done there in terms of skill development, where women are being picked up and trained in ITIs to drive heavy equipment in the mining industry. And so it's many a time it's in the mind as to what women can or can't do. Yeah. I think there are enough examples here in this room and elsewhere to show that those are actually barriers in the mind and not any limitation in terms of the capabilities or ability or ambition. So in terms of learnings, I think what we really need to do is the playbook that you've put together needs to start getting thicker and thicker in terms of picking up more such examples of role models, of success stories, of companies which are going out of their way to achieve gender parity, and make that something that others aspire to achieve.
No, you're absolutely right. And yes, we do intend to make that playbook thicker and thicker. It'll be a couple of pages thicker, I would imagine, I would reckon, at the end of today's event. Deepti, I'm going to give you the final word on this. On the back of the data that you've been looking at, and of course one of the other important aspects that I know that the Deloitte report highlights is the fact that there is a disproportionate amount of burden when it comes to mental well-being, depression, anxiety, etc., that women have to endure, especially working women have to endure because of the many challenges in the constant balancing act as well. So prescription time, the road ahead.
So you're right, Shereen, while over the 3 years, if you see the trend, this year we have seen a decline compared to the previous year. There's been a 10% reduction in the Women at Work survey when we looked at the burnout and the anxiety levels, but it is still there. And one of the key elements we saw that of is only 15% of the women said that the child care and the household responsibilities are shared. 70% actually said it's primarily their responsibility even though they're working. So obviously that leads to a huge issue. So I think the prescription there is, I think, twofold. One is we are encouraging women. So one is the flex. A lot of flex has been embraced as to where in terms of location, but not when. And I think that is very important part of flex that we are looking at to say it is not just that you're working from home, but maybe also the timings. It doesn't have to be a 9 to 5 sort of a thing. And how do we really pace that? Giving them a connect, giving them a peer group, because a lot of them, especially tech, women in tech, they don't come to office, they sit at home and work. But how do you connect? How do you find that peer group where you can work through? Clear executive sponsorship from the top, our exco and everybody, they sponsor, they mentor a few women and ensure, and having more role models. Today, 42% of our eligible women are in leadership roles in Deloitte. But that overall quota of eligible women obviously has to increase. And I think that's what, making more role models, giving them that connect, I think that's what really will take the road forward.
Well, that is the perfect note to end this conversation on. Deepti, thank you to the two of you for joining us as well here this evening. Anu, many thanks. Rajesh, thanks. Subhrakant, thanks so much. Rahul, thanks very much. And of course, Naveen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us here to take us through what you're doing individually, but more importantly, what you believe we can learn from. Thank you for sharing your experiences.